President, please be seated. The court is now back in session and the floor is given to the International Co-Prosecutor to resume the questioning. You may now proceed.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Witness, for explaining again about how you found out about the killing of commanders and led the 300 troops to the forest. But my question is, let me repeat it. Once you went into the forest, 25th of May, 78, did you have any contact then with Sao Pim after that date or any other East Zone commanders? Or was your group isolated?
In relation to the 300 soldiers who were with me in the jungle, I was the one who led them. I lost communication with any other forces.
Did other people join you? Did you have any civilians with you or any other soldiers that you came across that joined your group?
No. They were all soldiers from the battlefield. I mean those who were with me.
My recollection is that yesterday you said you did attacks to save civilians. Do you recall saying something like that? Did your group attempt to save any civilians?
When I organized the 3 soldiers in the jungle into a group, there were some civilians fleeing into the forest. I, seeing that, started the campaigns to attack back against Pol Pot forces. If I did not attack, I would have nothing. We absolutely has to engage in the fighting against Pol Pot in order to get rice, salt, and medicines.
These civilians that fled and joined you, why were they fleeing? Can you explain?
Regarding the fleeing civilians, they fled because villagers in villages were wanted. They had to flee to avoid the arrests, so I had to support them to free them.
So just so we're clear, who was arresting these civilians?
The Central Zone forces who were sent to arrest soldiers and civilians. Civilians and military and soldiers were fleeing from the East zones at the time because of the arrests.
During the time that you were in the forest, or after the time in January 79 when you returned to Kampuchea, did you ever come across any killing fields, any sites where there were bodies of persons who had been killed?
Upon my return from Vietnam, I never came across corpses, but I witnessed pits or graves, and I saw remains in the pits or graves, but not corpses on the ground, and I was told by people.
So can you explain a bit, where were these pits, these graves with human remains, and what were you told about them?
The graves were under the mango trees. The security office belongs to Pol Pot, and the graves had been filled already, and now that location became the farming area.
Where was that? What village, district, province? Do you recall?
I cannot recall the name of the village, Vihia Luang, but the commune is Vihia Luang, Bong Khmum district, and the current Bong Khmum province. I cannot tell you the name of the village.
When you were with the hospital for Battalion 156, Regiment 156, where was your family?
I was attached to Hospital 156, which is now located in Punya Krai district. I was stationed to the east of that hospital in Punya Krai. The hospital was there.
At that time, were you married? Did you have children?
I got married in 1972. I already had 3 children. My children were sent to live in the zone area. And I also had a grandmother-in-law living at the location, said the witness.
So what happened to your wife, your children, and your grandmother-in-law during the DK regime? Do you know?
Regarding my grandmother-in-law, my wife, and my 3 children, they were within the agricultural office of the zone. During the eruption of the fighting, they left the location and pledged to Svai Rieng to get together with my father. And they were further transferred to Liech Posat. It is because of the transfer of them to Liech that I decided to go and find them. All of them had been killed. No one survived.
Did you ever learn why they were killed?
I don't know, since I was stationed at the battlefield. That was the policy applies to people across the country. Those who were from the Eastern Zone were under execution, no matter the they were working or they were ordinary civilian, they had to be killed in accordance with the policy.
Mr. Witness, you've talked about spending time at the front line with your fellow Regiment 156 soldiers, risking your life fighting against the Vietnamese. You also told us eventually you were arrested by the Vietnamese and held in prison for 8 months. And yet, in November 1978, you went to Vietnam and you joined with them to, you said, cooperate to liberate the country. Can you explain why you did that?
It's a bit peculiarly formulated, this question, Mr. President. His arrest, his prison sentence was in 81 or 1980, so that could not have been a factor in his mind before he went to Vietnam in 78. That still had to happen.
That's certainly obvious. I understand that. That certainly gives this witness a reason not to be pro-Vietnamese. He himself was victimized by an 8-month unlawful arrest without trial. So, keeping that in mind, Your Honors, I think it'd be interesting to hear from the witness, why did he join with the Vietnamese to come and, what he said, cooperate to liberate the country?
You are asking me about the period from December 1978. I was back then in the jungle, and the Vietnamese sent groups of soldiers to come and contact me. Why? Because in the country, Pol Pot continuously killed people from time to time, and forces were engaged in the fighting against one another. I was in the jungle to attack Pol Pot as well. I had chance to meet the Vietnamese, so I had to discuss. And if I had not cooperated with the Vietnamese, how could the country be liberated? We, at the time, had to cooperate with the Vietnamese in order to create the Salvation Front. The Vietnamese could create a front because of the joining forces from Cambodia. The forces alone from the Vietnamese, from the Vietnam, could not engage in the fighting.
And why did you believe the country needed to be liberated from the DK regime? Even if it meant cooperating with foreigners, why did you feel it was necessary to liberate the country from Pol Pot?
There are reasons that I had to cooperate with the Vietnamese. One of the reasons is that Pol Pot killed Khmer people. That was real. And if we did not help people, all of our people would have been killed. The entire population would have been killed. I had to cooperate with the Vietnamese troops because they had a different type, and they were fully equipped with different types of weapons. We had to fight back to liberate people so that to save them from execution.
Thank you. Mr. President, I have no further questions, and I understand my colleagues' civil parties do not have further questions.
President, is it true that skilled lawyers for civil parties have no question? Do you have or don't you have?
Merci. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. President. I confirm that we do not have any questions.
President, thank you. And the Chamber gives the floor to the defense teams for the accused, starting first from the defense team for Mr. Nguyen Chia.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We weren't expecting to start until Monday, but I have enough questions to go all the way until 4 o'clock, no problem. Good afternoon, Mr. Witness. I'm the lawyer, international co-lawyer for Nguyen Chia. I would like to start with asking you some questions about various people in the East Zone, and my questions will be whether you know them, whether you knew them, and what their functions were. Let me start by asking you whether you know or knew Heng Samrin's brother named Heng Sam Kai.
You put this question to me. I knew Heng Sam Kai. I used to join the struggle with him. He is now deceased. He was the elder brother of Samdech Heng Samrin.
And can you tell me what you meant when you said that you joined the struggle together? When was that? Which moment? Can you be a bit more specific in this regard?
You want me to inform you in detail about Heng Sam Kai. When I ran into the forest on 25 December 1978, I came across Heng Sam Kai, who joined hands with me at the time in order to engage in the combat or attack against the Central Zone forces. I did not know his clear identity at the time. I had a brief meeting with him.
Was Heng Sam Kai already in Vietnam before the 25th of May 1978?
I went together with brother Heng Sam Kai into the jungle, together with also Heng Samrin. They had not been to Vietnam first before me. We went together.
I'll get back to that. But let me first ask you if you know what his role and position were in the East Zone.
I did not have a specific relation with Heng Sam Kai. I do not know his specific function and position. If I know, I would tell you.
I understand. The person that you recognized, the two people that you recognized on the photo this afternoon, both speak about Heng Sam Kai. Sin Ing, the bodyguard of Sao Pim in E3/5 10,716. Year N Khmer only 013-40542. Describes Heng Samkai as a chief of messenger office, and Non Nim, the bodyguard and driver of Sao Pim, in document E3/10717, English Khmer ERN only 013-40511, describes Ta Heng Samkai as the chief of the messengers of the zone. Is that something that maybe triggers your memory, that he was the chief of the East Zone messengers?
Akon.
I did not have communication with the military in the zone. We met when we fled into the forest. As for the relation before that period, I did not know his role and function.
I understand, but let me now get back to what you said about you joining him. An American journalist who was appointed as an expert in the trial against Duik wrote a book, Brother Enemy, E3/2376, and he speaks about Heng Samkai, and he actually interviewed Heng Samkai in 1981. English ERN 00192440, Khmer 001915996 and 97, and French 00237111. Let me read the whole excerpt so that you know what I'm talking about. It says, Chandra writes, the fact that Heng Samrin's elder brother, Heng Samkai, another Eastern Zone leader, had already made it to Vietnam, helped in the liaison. Now comes a quote from Heng Samkai. We had come to realize, Samkai told me in 1981, that it was impossible to overthrow Pol Pot on our own. We had to seek Vietnamese help. As the chairman of the Eastern Zone couriers, who carried messages back and forth between party units as well as to Vietnam, he had long known the Vietnamese. And now comes the interesting part for you. Making it to the border in January 1978, he was flown to Ho Chi Minh City in a Vietnamese helicopter. He and other Khmer Rouge defectors assembled in the former police training school at Duc. End of quote. Now, Mr. Witness, few questions. First, apparently, according to Chanda, Samkai was already in Vietnam in January 1978. Is that possible?
Akon.
I met Heng Samkai in the forest for a brief moment. There were a few of us in the forest having only cooking pot. and some of them are aware of that, including Heng Samrin, who is also aware of that. We have only a red cooking pot at the time. We had it nowhere at the time. All I knew at the time is that he was Heng Som Kai.
Let me try it differently. I believe your evidence is that 25 May 78, you and your regiment rebelled against the Central Forces, Central Zone Forces. You were a few months in the jungle, and then you made it to Vietnam. Is it then that you met Heng Som Kai? And if yes, wasn't Heng Som Kai already in Vietnam for at least 7 months?
He met me, and that is his statement. It is his own statement. I do not mind with that statement. As I said, I had a brief meeting with Heng Som Kai. I was in charge of some soldiers, and I accidentally met him in the forest. He did not have many soldiers at the time. He was fleeing for his life. I did not know and do not know the entire detail of him.
I understand. Let me go back to that citation from Heng Som Kai. It was impossible to overthrow Pol Pot on our own. We had to seek Vietnamese help. Is that something he told you as well, or is that something that you heard from him or from others? Attempts to overthrow Pol Pot early 78, but they weren't successful, so therefore the Vietnamese had to intervene.
It is his idea. It is his own words. I do not have any objection to his words. However, in relation to the fighting and combat against Vietnam, it was first me who contacted the Vietnamese at Tuot village. And Prip J died, and he was one of the liaison officer, and there is one individual surviving, working now at the Senate. He also liaised with the Vietnamese, and we were in cooperation in order to attack and take back the country. We had no choice but to cooperate with the Vietnamese forces to attack the Pol Pot forces. We had to ask for help from Vietnamese forces. After there was an agreement, the front was organized with the assistance of from the Ho Chi Minh city.
I'll get back to that. Let me first ask you about some more East Zone, high-ranking East Zone military cadres. Yesterday, you mentioned Paul Saroon. Who was Paul Saroon? What was his function?
During the Pol Pot regime, I did not know Paul Saroon's position. I met him when we fled to the jungle in order to fight against the Pol Pot group. And previously, I did not know his position at all. I only got to know him when we were in the jungle.
Was he the chief of the East Zone military staff, or rather the deputy chief, together with Heng Samrin? Is that possible?
Paul Sarun was not attached to Division 4, nor did he work with Heng Samrin. Heng Samrin was the division commander, who was my commander as well, but Paul Sarun was different. I did not know which military unit he was in. I only met him in the jungle.
That's fine. Do you know what the function of Paul Sarun is today?
At present, he was with the military staff.
Another presently very high-ranking military person, Kun Kim. Is that someone that you know?
You asked me about him. I can say that I knew him in 1979. And before that, he was a civilian. After we liberated the country, I came to live in Chiroi Pagoda, and I got to know Kun Kim. That's all I knew about him, because I had no further contact with him since then.
So you didn't meet him in '78 in the forest, is that correct?
That is correct. I did not meet him there.
Two other names. Do you know someone called Heng Samrin?
No, the name Heng Samrin does not sound familiar to me.
Do you know, did you know Pen Sovan?
I only met Pan Sawan for one time only, when I was in a jungle in Memut. I blessed the battlefront, and I saw him driving a vehicle. I asked for his name, and he said his name was Pan Sawan, and that was all. And that happened before we created the front.
I will get back to him as well. Did you know, or did you meet in '78 someone called Yos Por? Yos Por.
No, I have never heard Juh Paul. President, maybe the pronunciation is off. There is one person named Juh Pao, as indicated in a document. And witness, do you know Juh Pao? Witness. As for the name of Juh Pao, I heard of that name, but I never met him.
Bu Tang, you know him?
For me, I heard people saying the name, but I never met this person Butong in person. I heard people talking about Butong.
Did you know Chia Sim?
Yes, I know him. I know him very well.
What can you tell us? What can you tell the chamber about Chia Sim?
Allow me to give you my response. Chia Sim had his native name as Chia Salat. And during 1975 or 76, he was a deputy chief of a district of Ponye Krai. And he was also known as a Tat Menso or a White Man. And later on he was known as Chia Sim, but I do not know of his actual roles or functions. And when we organized the front, I met him there as well.
Nornim E3/10717 Khmer year and only 013-40448 says that Chia Sim, the wife of Chia Sim, was related to Sao Pim. Is that correct?
Akun.
As for Chia Sim's wife, she did not have any relationship to Sao Pim. Sao Pim's native birthplace was in the Til Sam, Svai Tiep, Svai Rieng province. So for that reason, he could not be related. And Sao Pim was one of his was from a family of 3 siblings.
Maybe is it possible that Sao Pim's wife was related to Chia Sim's wife?
I am not sure about that, because Ye Karo, Sao Pim's wife, came from Preveng province, and Chia Sim's wife also came from that area, that is from Krobau. But I do not know whether the 2 women are related.
3 more names, then I'm done. Mr. Witness, Kiyu Chanda, does that name sound familiar?
I only heard of the name Kiyu Chanda, but I did not have any contact with him. And I heard of his name after Cambodia was liberated. I never had any conversation with him.
Was he the presiding judge in the 1979 in absentia trial against Pol Pot and Ieng Sary?
I do not know about that.
Uk Bun Chun.
I know Ok Bun Chun very well.
គឺនៅក្នុងព្រៃ
We were in the jungle together, and we also worked together. And when I was on a helicopter in order to form the front, I traveled with him.
And my last name, Mat Lee.
Madley was a charm person. I know him, but I do not have any relationship with him. At the time I met him in the jungle. However, he passed away. He's a charm person, and he was also a former member of the National Assembly.
Thank you for these clarifications. Now let me turn to what you said in your WRI, E3/10667, question and answer 3. You talk about the period November 1978. And you said that Vietnam invited you to take part in the establishment of the resistance movement known as the National Salvation Front. Can you describe meetings that you had, that you attended when this front was established?
At that time, the Cambodian and the Vietnamese sides agreed to form a National Salvation Front in order to save the people from the genocidal regime. And we all agreed to that, and that is from both sides, Vietnamese side and Cambodian side, for the establishment of the said front. And after the front was created, we launched an assault campaign.
When was this meeting? And where was this meeting?
The meeting was held in Ho Chi Minh City. That is for the establishment of the front.
Just to make sure if I understand, were there two meetings? One in Ho Chi Minh City and another one in early 79 in Snow. Question and answer 5, you say in early 79 while I was in Long Giao, Vietnamese and Khmer troops established the 2nd December Front in Snu District, Kratie Province, to prepare for offenses into Cambodia. Or is this the same meeting? Or are there two meetings, one in Ho Chi Minh and one in Snol on the 2nd of December 78?
In Ho Chi Minh, we held a meeting in order to prepare the front policy. As for the meeting that took place in Snul at the 2nd December, there were monks and civilians who supported the 2nd December campaign in Snul district. So there were two separate meetings. And during the second meeting, There were various participants, including monks and civilians.
That's clear. Can you describe that first meeting in Ho Chi Minh City first? Where was it held? Who were the participants? And what was discussed?
I do not know all the participants in the meeting held in Ho Chi Minh City. The content of the meeting was for the creation of the National Salvation Front, as well as the 8 and 12 principles, and that it has to be agreed by both sides, Cambodia and Vietnam. Then later on, the meeting was held in Snow district, where civilians and monks attended.
Who attended in Ho Chi Minh City? Do you remember?
I cannot recall them all.
I understand. Any of the names that I just mentioned to you, Heng Sam Rin, Heng Sam Kai, Chia Sim, Pen So Van, any of those names that we just discussed, were they present in Ho Chi Minh?
Yes, they were. That is for the meeting held in Ho Chi Minh. However, there were more participants whose names I cannot recall.
And are you able to remember how long before the big 2 December meeting, the meeting in Ho Chi Minh took place? Was it a few weeks before? Was it a few months before? Do you remember?
I cannot recall it. As for the meeting at the 2nd December was to inform them about the creation of the front with the participation of the military, monks and civilians. And that was the purpose at the 2nd December meeting.
Is it correct that the 2nd December meeting in Snow was a mass meeting, that thousands of people participated?
There were many people. It could be in hundreds or in thousands. And it took place at the location of 2nd December or Pit Nu, and at present it is known as Pit Nu village or 2nd December village.
And at the time, was it a rubber plantation east of Snow?
Yes, it was in a rubber plantation.
Do you recall whether a new national anthem was sung during the 2nd of December meeting?
At that time, the song was composed by Chan. Chan was well known for composing songs. He was part of the arts performance in the East Zone.
And new flags, red and yellow flags were shown. Is that something that you recall?
As for the national flag, it was flown at the P2 location. It was erected there.
And do you recall that the 14 members of the Front Central Committee were introduced during the meeting?
I cannot recall that. And if I were to recall the members of the committee, I cannot recall their names. It happened a long time ago.
I understand. Did Front Chairman Heng Samrin read out the program of the Front?
Akon.
Yes, Heng Samrin read the document of the National Salvation Front and disseminated the information so that the people got to know about it.
And do you recall the attendance of very high-ranking Vietnamese leaders?
Yes, there were high-ranking officers, but I do not know their names. There were military personnel from both sides, that is from Cambodia and Vietnam, but I do not know their names.
Does the name Le Duc Tho mean anything to you?
The name is Le Duc Tho. Witness, do you know this person? Witness. As for Le Duc Tho, I heard of these names, who was a Vietnamese person, but I did not meet the person. I only heard people talking about his name, Le Duc Tho.
Did you see Heng Samrin once he finished his speech walking up to Le Duc Tho to talk to him? Was he congratulated? Is that something that you recall?
Personally, I did not see that.
And is it correct to say that all the people that I mentioned and that you knew were present at this 2nd December meeting in Snow, in the East Zone, former East Zone?
Yes, that is correct.
Let me move on to my next subject. Yesterday you were shown some telegrams by the President, telegrams which were signed by John. You discussed these telegrams as well this morning. You said that you didn't...
Akon.
President, witness, please wait. You have not yet been asked the question.
Yesterday you said you didn't know who this John was. John is in fact Sao Pim. Is that something that surprises you?
if you say that he was a Sao Pum, I do not believe it, because a Sao Pum was never known as Chon at all. And if you look at these documents, which were reported through Uncle Noon, etc., and they were all made by Chon. But Chon is not a Sao Pum.
Sao Pum
Sao Pums, that is his alias, and his native name is Sao Yan, and it's not a Chon. I don't believe you. I don't believe that.
Well, I think both parties agree that Chon was in fact Sao Pim. So let me move on from that topic. Mr. Witness, one last question, I think, before we have to finish. Does the name Hey So mean anything to you? Vietnamese high-ranking cadre, Hey So.
No, I do not know this Hai So person.
Did you ever see Sao Pim speak with Vietnamese cadres either end of 77 or early 1978?
Personally, I did not see Sao Pim speaking to any Vietnamese person. Thank you, Counsel, and thank you, Mr. Witness. It is now appropriate time for today's adjournment, and the Chamber will resume tomorrow, Thursday, 3rd November 2016, commencing from 9 o'clock in the morning. And tomorrow the Chamber will hear key document presentations by parties in relation to armed conflict. This information is for the parties and the general public. And Mr. Witness, the Chamber is grateful of your testimony. It is not yet concluded, and you are invited to return on Monday, 7 November 2016. And the Chamber is grateful of Mrs. Soxatita, the Duty Counsel. And the hearing of the testimony of this witness is not yet concluded. Therefore, you are invited to return on Monday next week. And court officer, please work with Wisu to make arrangement for the witness to return to his accommodation and have him return to attend the proceedings on Monday next week. Security personnel, you are instructed to take the two accused, Nuon Chi and Kia Sampon, back to the ECCC detention facility and have them return to attend the proceeding tomorrow before 9 o'clock. The Chamber is now adjourned.